Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture.
Okay, I already see one. Give him. Okay.
They're the same picture.
That is what they'd like you to believe, but of course that really is not the case. On an outside view, these two games look very similar, and in quite a few aspects it is the same. They both feature modern and classic gameplay. They have the same character roster. Okay, these games are really different, and that is quite honestly surprising. Sonic Forces was meant to just have elements copy-pasted from generations to make stuff easier for them and save time as Sonic's 26th anniversary was coming up. Yeah, 26th. Not the 25th, the 26th. Very on the ball timing of the release, I gotta say. With it being mostly a copy-paste, shouldn't the game have done just as well as before, if not better? We've got more modern graphic capabilities, the textures will be more defined, and hell, Sega even giving the fans an OC maker. What's not to love? A lot. There are a lot of problems with this game, and I'll have a deep look into this panned mess while giving comparison to what should have been done with other entries to the series and other games. Also, this is my opinion is not fact. If you disagree, that's fine, yada yada yada, let's just get into it. Now, I don't want to be overly harsh to Sonic Forces, as I believe that on its own, it's a decent platformer. Take away the plot and the constant barrage of dialogue and you have an okay platformer. Controls certainly feel stiff at times, but eventually you do adjust to the way the physics work in this world. But of course, the story and character involvement is in as standard. So before I dig into this installment, I will mention a few other things that Sonic Forces does well. Firstly, the graphics and lighting are great. The environments all have a strong atmosphere attached to them and are just really pleasing to look at. Accompanied with these graphics are the scores, and to be honest, I don't think there is one singular Sonic game that has had bad music. Fist Bump, while not having as much staying power as Endless Possibilities or Reach for the Stars, is still a great anime style theme that I enjoy listening to. The level music is fine, I guess. You won't catch me listening to Sunset Heights like you would with City Escape, but it's passable. Except for the final boss theme, that was really good. I will say though that I think the performances from the voice actors were really quite good for what they were given. And keep in mind, this is a Sonic game. Good dialogue is hard to come by. But because Sega gave this game a more in-depth plot than normal, that means they had to make the script sound more authentic than usual. You can catch lines that actually sound as if Sonic is saying them and not just Roger Craig Smith in a recording booth.
Exactly. As it stands, there's no way we can win this.
Of course we can win this, we always do. We just haven't figured that part out yet.
So credit where credit is due. And lastly, the customization for your avatar is pretty expandable, allowing for more unique custom characters to be made, and I mean that comes as standard, I guess, you'll come to expect that. And that's just about all the positives with Forces. That was fast. Yeah, that's the extent of Forces' good deeds. But now we must look into the mistakes, and god damn it, there are a lot of them. So buckle in, because from here on out this video will be a lot more serious as I take a deep look into Sonic Forces' biggest flaws. Sonic Forces was made with a more serious plot in mind. The story going along through the game is a lot more in depth than any of the other much more modern canonical Sonic games. In it, you rally up a resistance against the domineering Eggman Empire and take back the land that was taken from you. That's a quick summary, as there are a lot more twists and turns than that, and come to think of it, the story is much like a Just Cause title. No, really, a key figure of the resistance returns from wherever they were individually, they see that injustice has befallen the land, rebels have sprung up, and slowly bit by bit you reclaim locations and put them under the resistance's belt until the evil leader of the initial empire is overthrown. That works well for an IP like Just Cause. But for Sonic, does it really? And that's our first problem that became a major part in this game's downfall. The plot for this game and the aesthetic it was trying to create conflicted with the initial world and predetermined setting. The plot is just stained with war. Everything within this title screams conflict and a strive to find a resolution. I have to commend Sega for being daring with their actions, but does this character, an anthropomorphic blue hedgehog donning red Yeezys and able to run faster than the speed of sound, fit within the codes and conventions of a battlefield? Fitting the saturated theming with the more serious subject of conflict can be pulled off though, yes. After all, Just Cause 3 is a very bright, colourful, mostly loose and crazy clusterfuck of a game. It's an anarchist simulator and it was one of the most refreshing experiences I've had in a long time. But the thing is, Just Cause 3 is an 18+ game. With all that craziness comes a somewhat mature plot, and while flying around in a wingsuit and utilising something Ezio Auditore would have created seems like crazy fantasy, it does still remotely have realistic elements that ground the game to feel like an exaggerated reality. Now coming back into Sonic Forces, we have a very unrealistic world with characters having powers that we could only ever dream of. The thought of this being meant for adults is ludicrous. So we got a naturally more mature sort of story mixed in with a world and cast of characters that must remain kid-friendly. See how there's a bit of a problem here? Sonic games pride themselves as being pretty simple a lot of the time and having much more basic plots, as seen in the story for Generations, Colors, Lost World and even the classic 2D games from Sonic 1 all the way through to 4 and Mania. In Forces, the story tried to appeal to a wider range of consumers, which at the same time threw the integrity of the franchise's style down the drain. Now you could make the argument that, oh Tom, Unleashed had a complex plot on the same level as Forces, if not more so. How can you justify your point if previous games have done the same in the past? Because Sonic Unleashed's whole plot and aesthetic was adventure. That game actually felt like an adventure. You're going to all these new locations never seen before across the planet, transforming into a discount werewolf after dark with a much different gameplay style, piecing the world back together like a puzzle and defeating Dark Gaia before it consumes the world and plunges it into darkness. And all of this is happening with a very limited band of characters. 6 are crucially important to the progression of the story, and that's it. Unleashed was a journey. But what about Forces? We're going to locations, most of which we have been to plenty of times before. We're not trying to save the world from a cataclysmic event this time, but rather reclaim it from enemy hands. The gameplay has been recycled, and shoddily at that. There is a massive cast of characters that try to affect the plot one way or another, and there are just no proper stakes at hand. The plot tried to be deep, but it just can't be supported by the countless problems it was plagued with. You can't make a story about war and sacrifice within a game full of kid-friendly cosmetics and styles that go against the story's themes. That makes no sense.
Here comes the enemy, strike them down.
So what else is wrong? Well, let's just go back to the beginning of the plot. After you complete the first level, you get an expositional cutscene starting with Sonic saving some unimportant animals from some robots. Standard stuff. Eggman then releases Infinite to take him out. In the process, we see 4 villains make a consecutive appearance: Shadow, Zavok, Metal Sonic and Chaos. So let's just pause here. Let's say that I'm new and just finished installing this game 10 minutes ago. Right now, I've just completed the first level and have just begun to get to grips with how the mechanics work in this game. Seeing this gives the impression that these will be 4 bosses that you get to defeat and then finish off with Eggman himself. After all, they've got the typical properties of what bosses look and act like. That, and they all are bosses from previous games, so we thought I'm alright. No, of course not. Only 2 of the 4 bosses are ones that you actually battle with, and they're the 2 least interesting picks. The first of this band that you fight is Zavok, the leader of the Deadly Six. Wait, is it Deadly or something else? I genuinely don't remember the name of this Sinister Six knockoff. Anyway, Zavok from Lost World. Now, why is he an uninteresting pick? Because he is a surface level villain with very little personality other than, me look like devil, me must conquer world because evil. That creative spark that Sega usually has just isn't there in this antagonist, and that creates a boss fight with no real weight or value. When you face off against a boss in a game, it could mean so many things. It could be used to make you utilise a new ability or skill you've acquired. It could be a major turning point for the plot that has much larger meaning in the grand scheme of things. It could just be a challenging fight, forcing you to retaliate to the best of your ability and prove your skill. But none of that is present here. Zavok spends the whole fight shit-talking, you're doing the same thing to damage him over and over again. It's one of the easiest levels in the game, which is an accomplishment seeing as you can complete this game in less than 3 hours if you genuinely try, and there is no meaning to this fight. Well, that's not true. This is the first time you can play as Sonic again. This is a massive moment. No, it's not. Swap Sonic out for your avatar and there is no difference to how this fight turns out. You're just strafing around easily avoidable missile barrages and doing homing attacks on Zavok's Wasp until it's defeated. That's it. There's no boost feature that you can use as you're on an absolutely tiny platform that crumbles as the stage goes on. The homing attack is no longer an exclusive utility for modern Sonic as your avatar has the wire attack, which is the exact same thing. Zavok was a very poor choice to have as the first boss. He was uninspired, generic, and, quite honestly, forgettable. Which sucks, because this first boss fight could have been so much better. Here's how I would have done this conflict instead. We keep the cutscene that starts at the beginning of this fight, we then have Sonic being in a running boss stage. That way it will create a good contrast to all the other levels we played through previously to get to this point. In this fight, you would regain the ability to boost, quickstep, and above all else, actually go fast again. As you're running through, Zavok could be on his wasp thing, throwing attacks at you until there is an opening allowing you to attack back. Do this 3 times and you defeat him, but along with this, I would completely shift the next level into this boss fight. The level preceding this one is where Sonic makes his way to the hangar where the Death Egg keeps shuttles to return back to Earth. So, the first section of the boss fight could be Sonic and Zavok making their way through the internment facility, second portion could be them going through the crossroads in space, and to finish it off, they would do the last part in the hangar. That would transition a lot better and reintroduce you to Sonic's mechanics better than just a still stage. But alas, it was a missed opportunity. But that's just one boss. What about the other? Is it Chaos? Can we fight him in his 4th or 6th form again? Maybe even in perfect Chaos form? Or Shadow? Quite overused at this point as an anti-hero, but he still has some potential to be a daring fight. Which is it? It's Metal again. Oh, for God's sake, here we go again. I have just lost count how many times Metal Sonic has been recycled for the sake of having a villain. I can easily forgive it being used in the earlier titles like CD and Adventure because it was still a new and interesting concept that would give way to more unique opportunities for the series. But if you look at more recent games, Metal's usage has just been ridiculous. Generations, Boom, Mania, All-Stars Racing Transformed, now Forces 2. And what makes this worse is that Metal Sonic never changes his appearance. He is always the exact same, takes damage in the same way, and has been the same for years and years. I can give Mania a pass here as they actually made Metal a legitimate threat, albeit with a massive glaring weak spot, but it was unique and one of the many reasons why Sonic Mania was so bloody good. But in Forces, no change at all. As far as boss fights go in this game, it's not awful, it's certainly leagues above Zavok's fight, but one thing that I would change about it isn't in this stage at all. It's actually rooted in the stage 2 levels after Zavok's boss fight. In this stage, both Sonic and your OC avatar are playable and we are introduced to the double boost in this stage. Aside from being a crowd pleaser, this feature makes you go even faster than you already could, leaving a trail of destruction in your wake. This stage is fine and all, but I feel as if the introduction to double boost should have been in Metal's boss fight instead. That way it actually feels more like a victory as Sonic and the player's character take this thing down together for the first time. I'd imagine that a lot of very young fans were already ecstatic at the introduction of the double boost, you know, because their custom character and Sonic now act like they need each other and all that soppy shit, yeah. Now, imagine how many more kids will be screaming in joy at the sight of the double boost being introduced, while in the heat of the boss fight, dealing the killing blow, then getting the whole "we work together and no one can stop us" stuff. I can imagine that would be a bit more impactful. So, those are my 2 verdicts on the 2 bosses from this band of reunited adversaries. But if you don't fight Shadow or Chaos, what happens to them? Chaos gets disintegrated by Classic Sonic somehow, and Shadow gets TKO'd by Shadow. And both of these are in cutscenes. Yeah, great idea. Let's just get rid of the 2 much more powerful villains in a cutscene and not let the player enjoy whatever encounters they could have had. Like seriously, could they really not have used either of these characters to replace the 3 bloody boss fights we have with Infinite? Who, by the way, is probably one of the worst villains we've had in the canon for a long time. And while we're on the subject, let's have a discussion about Infinite. Infinite is not a good overall antagonist for a multitude of reasons. His whole character motif is, Shadow said that I'm weak, so I now want world domination to prove I'm not weak. That is the most childish motif that a character's whole basis could revolve around. Along with this motif, Infinite has a very low-tone, monotonous voice that has somehow managed to sound even more edgy than Shadow's voice, who himself is a character that is the literal definition of an edgy persona. And that's the extent of his character. Yet another surface level villain that will be easily forgotten once the next game eventually rolls around. In-game, we combat against Infinite 3 times, once as Sonic, once as your avatar, and lastly with both. The first conflict arises in the Mystic Jungle atop a giant snake. That never gets explained, but nonetheless it exists. This first brawl is mostly okay. You got an interesting flurry of attacks coming at you, and the stage does change about in places. So it's not just another hold down, boost and win thing. The second is a lot less interesting. Do the same stuff to damage him and no change in strategy. Pretty much just filler to force the plot to move on to the next big thing. And finally, the last confrontation. Seen better, but still decent enough. As a whole, Infinite's fights are just mediocre, gameplay and level design wise, but they are all compromised by one main key thing that just ruins the levels. The music. Okay, Sega, I love your company, I'm a fan of multiple different series, especially Yakuza. I've played so many arcade games made by you when I used to go on holiday down south. You're pretty damn good at what you do, most of the time. But who the hell composed Infinite's theme? It's as if someone sprawled their fingers out across a soundboard and this was the result. I mentioned earlier about how Sonic games don't really have bad scores, but god damn it, Infinite's theme sticks out like a bloody sore thumb. Just have a listen to this. Just noise with little direction. As comparison, here is Shadow's theme when he used to be a proper antagonist. Here is the theme of the Deadly Six from Sonic Lost World. And here is the boss level music from Sonic Colors. All of these have better direction than Infinite's theme, and to cause more audible discomfort, dialogue spills out of him every 2 seconds stating that he is too powerful and that you are nothing but a trembling child. I hate Infinite, but not in the way the game wants me to hate him. And last but not least, we have Eggman, who surprisingly only has 2 encounters, one at the start and one at the end. But even though he's only got 2 interactions in gameplay, he's still leagues above every single other boss fight in the game. The first fight, while being much more basic, is still relatively enjoyable. It starts out with what you'd expect from a classic style boss fight, but then turns into a different fight to what we were expecting. Instead of it being a 2D traditional conflict, it turns into a 3D conflict in the Z direction. Pair this with pretty catchy 8-bit style tunes and actually entertaining dialogue this time, you got an above average battle. But the second one, ergo the final boss, just blows the rest of the game's bosses out of the water. You start off as classic Sonic in a 2D level with an objective resembling the first Eggman fight, already a nice callback to earlier parts of the game. We then transition into the second part as your avatar, in a stage of what Savic's boss battle should have been. As the avatar, you are essentially modern Sonic, just slower. And that works for this part of the stage because you need to platform in 3D carefully here. There's a bit more of a challenge present and that's much better change of pace compared to the rest of the game, but we'll get into the difficulty later. After you complete the second portion, the third and final part commences and this is just fantastic! We finish off in modern form with classic Sonic and your avatar inside of an illusion. This is inside the reality that the Phantom Ruby has created, which is yet another callback to one of the game's main themes, which is perception. Again, we'll talk about that in a bit. This final boss very much resembles the final boss from Colors, and that's probably why it worked, as it's just another recycled element. It's just this iteration has 3 heads this time, as opposed to the one to tie in all 3 playable characters. Add on a banging soundtrack and finishing off with a triple boost this time, we have the only boss fight in the game that I can say was certainly at the very least good. So, how in God's name did this boss fight get shipped in with the same game as Zavok's boss fight? That's one actually worthwhile and engaging fight out of, 7 others? To me, this just seems like missed opportunity to make these boss fights and the bosses themselves better. They need more diverse and interesting motifs and personalities to bring them to life more. Eggman cannot just shoulder all of the good design. Spread it out and give other bosses more thought to improve the experience. Wanting world domination for the sake of it is not a good motif to have in a character unless it's rooted in a good backstory that explains why they want to watch the world burn. And no, Infinite's backstory is not justified, it's fucking laughable. Remember earlier how I touched upon the fact that Sonic Forces is really easy? Well, how come? What makes it easily completable? Well, having a look at the number of levels will give you a good idea as to how little you need to do to finish it. The base game alone only has 30 levels, most of which can be completed in less than 3 minutes each. That's not including the episode Shadow DLC, which itself has only 3 levels of. 33 properly made levels that aren't extra activities at the maximum. To put that into perspective of how little content that is, Sonic Colors had 6 planets, each with 6 acts and 1 boss each, plus the 2 extra stages and the final boss fight at Terminal Velocity Zone. 45 stages in total, some quite short, others much more lengthy and focusing more on platforming. Generations had 9 different memory locations with 2 acts each, 6 bosses that carry Chaos Emeralds and of course the final boss. That alone is less than 30, but Generations has 90 side stages to complete for items like music and concept art. Not only that, but to progress on to the next boss fight of each cluster of memory stages, you have to complete 3 of these challenges, one from each stage individually. Sega may have had a case of Assassin's Creed syndrome with the repeated tasks, but still, it's quite a lot of extra content to boot. Same goes for 06, Unleashed, Lost World, Adventure 1 and 2. All these titles had more content, at least in terms of levels, than Forces did. Keep in mind, this is a AAA game made in 2017 with the fewest number of levels from a 3D title in years. That is embarrassing. And what about the extra levels? No more than 15. Are you kidding me? And the worst part is, these extra activities are completely ludicrous challenges that don't show you new ways of traversing courses. They're just assets bundled together and labelled as challenges to try and inject extra content into the game artificially. Sonic Generations used extra challenges as ways to show you things about the map that you might not have known about prior, or just helps you get better at carefully coercing the level itself. The One Ring challenge forces you to conserve your health and become more careful when platforming. The Doppelganger race is great at ensuring you learn a level inside out so you can find the best route possible. The challenges aren't just there for the sake of being filler, they actively teach the player how to improve their performance and get better and better to work your way up to the final boss. But back to Forces. What does this teach you? You have to unlock some of these stages with red rings, mind you, so people that have gone to these stages aren't exactly fresh off the bus to how Sonic games work. They're not teaching players anything new, they're just artificially harder versions of already easy levels, and Sega called it a day. But what about the content in the actual game instead? First off, we have 7 different locations where all these levels are based. Green Hill, Chemical Plant, the Death Egg, the City, Mystic Jungle, Metropolis and the Eggman Empire Fortress. These settings are once again problematic for multiple reasons. The most prominent being that we have been to at least 4 of these 7 locations at least once before. Green Hill Zone in particular has been used a lot in recent years, and turning this location partially into a desert does not justify calling a new level idea. The lack of creative new areas plays an additional part in creating dissatisfaction with the whole game. And I mean, I get why they're repeating stages. Sonic as an IP has been around for close to 30 years now. We've had multiple reincarnations of the character and the setting. We've been through the 1001 Arabian Nights, come into contact with the Echidna tribe at the Mystic Ruins, been through a discount Mario Galaxy. Sega would be understandably running out of ideas, as so many aesthetics and themes and settings have all been done before. But we've seen in Sonic Mania, which was released the same year as Forces, a place like Studiopolis Zone, a place centered around the theme of filmmaking, resulting in very scenic and memorable moments. So what about the 3D title? Why can't we spend more time exploring areas like the City, a place which has a more cultural feel to it with the building style and general saturation? It would have been a bit more interesting otherwise. And the fact that we're returning to these stages also means that we know what to expect. We all know Green Hill is full of bridges and gaps and easily killable enemies and waterfalls. We know Chemical Plant is surrounded by an oil ocean and has chemical hazards and the obligatory underwater segments. This, once again, creates more dissatisfaction and makes the game even simpler, as there is no element of unknowing what's next, as we've seen it all before. To add more insult to injury, there is really no properly fleshed out reason why we are returning to these locations once again. It's an anniversary game, yeah, but weren't these locations specifically from Sonic's past? In Generations, he clearly showed that he only loosely remembers about Green Hill, inferring that this is no longer a location in his current world, because let's be honest, the landscape around him has had a mind of its own from the first game up to now. So Green Hill reappeared just like that, and is now one of his favourite spots. And then there's the Death Egg. How the fuck did that reappear in such a short span of time without explanation? In Generations, the locations were more than justified for their appearance. The time meter sent different places into the white void, resulting in the many classics making a return. But there's no time-related shenanigans going on in Forces. Eggman is using counterfeits of previous enemies, not places. So why are they making a needless return? Anniversary game or not, you need to explain why locations that have been absent for many years are making a comeback and why the characters act like it's always been there, when we know for a fact that they were definitely not on the same planet as places like Spagonia and Soliana. The little things like this just add up to make the game feel more inconsistent. What about other bits of content? The gameplay. As mentioned before, there are 3 distinct gameplay styles: Modern, Classic and Avatar stages. Modern is 3D for the most part and has a couple of unique perks that make it stand out from the other 2. The main perk is the boost mechanic, which has been presented in canon since 2008. As a feature it's fine and all, but something just feels as if it's missing. When you use the boost, you're supposed to be running as fast as you can possibly get, but even then, Sonic as a whole just feels slower in this title. Don't get me wrong, you're still going at exhilarating speeds, but the sensation of Sonic's momentum is not conveyed as prominently in Forces. I know that sounds pretty stupid, but if you compare his speed to what he was achieving in Generations, Unleashed, even Colors, you'll notice that it feels like there's a bit of strain to it in Forces, and this is very prominent in the 2D sections of his levels. I don't know about you, but when I play as Modern Sonic, I want to actually feel as if I'm going fast. I want to feel the rush of barreling down a path of enemies and watch as they disintegrate before my eyes. I want to see nothing but blurs around me as the environment constantly shifts as I'm travelling at ungodly speeds. What I don't want is for sections meant for speed to feel as if I've got a leash around my neck and I'm being constrained from doing what I actually want to do. Another feature, almost exclusively for modern gameplay, is the double jump. The double jump has seen quite a few changes over the years, but this is without question my least favourite version of it. Jumping in this game's engine already feels stiff and unnatural, and the double jump does not make it feel any better. No matter how fast you're going in a regular jump, as soon as you press A again, your horizontal velocity slows to a crawl and you don't even get that much extra height out of the manoeuvre at all. This sort of double jump is more akin to making careful and concise platforming easier, as opposed to covering more height and distance like older versions of this mechanic. Since you practically stop in midair when performing this move, it's helpful for stopping you from leaping over a platform entirely and ensuring that you platform with ease. And I would be fine with this, if there wasn't already the stomp mechanic. Now, this is where things become problematic, because the stomp virtually does the same thing as the double jump. I know it's a bit of an exaggeration, but still, the stomp completely stops your horizontal velocity and in return you plummet downwards, destroying anything below you. This does the same job as the double jump, just better. So, what was the point in making this double jump so stiff? It makes the whole feature pretty much useless unless it's a last minute resort or you're mere pixels away from a collectible, as the stomp is just better in every other way. Generations use the double jump in a different manner, making you dash only horizontally for half a second, then letting gravity take over again. This made it way more useful for clearing gaps, platforming, and picking up speed again if it was lost in the first place. I don't understand why that was traded out for this, but let's move on. The next gameplay style is Classic. These are entirely 2D levels, and to be honest, there's really not much to talk about besides the fact it's harder to platform in this game's engine. Same abilities from Generations, looks the same, still doesn't speak, not a lot to go off of unfortunately. But I will say one thing. Fuck that challenge where you have to spin attack like 10 enemies in a row in stage 3, that was some BS. And lastly, the Avatar levels. Now, this is where the game starts to get more interesting. On one of the first screens of the Avatar creator, there is a specific tab where you can change the species of the character you wish to make. Each of the 7 species has a unique ability that makes them excel at different scenarios. Dog lets you have some rings after you respawn from a death, Wolf draws items such as rings towards you, Rabbit gives you longer invincibility time if you've taken damage, Bear knocks back enemies when doing wire attacks, Cat lets you hold onto rings after taking damage, Bird lets you do a double jump, and Hedgehog makes rings remain longer on the ground after you've been hit. These species all add something new to the table and make the Avatar stages a tiny bit more varied. And hey, this customizable part isn't just cosmetic, so that's good too. These abilities appeal to a wide range of players who may play these games in different ways. If you take more of a safety route, then Rabbit or Hedgehog is an ideal pick. Are you seeking fast-paced platforming and a quicker way of moving through a level? Bird or Bear is your best choice. The avatar creation at least gives the player a more unique experience of their playthrough. But then we have the same knife in the gut that ruins Sonic's double jump mechanic. Enter the Wispons. These accessories enhance the power of the Wisps and give your avatar extra gimmicks to mess around with. Some enable you to fly, others just stop enemies in their tracks, some just suck up everything in their vicinity. These are powerful weapons. But those three I've highlighted have the same related properties as some of the species perks as well. The Hover Wispon makes the bird's double jump pretty much pointless. Being able to stop enemies just like that negates the entire purpose of the rabbit and hedgehog. The wolf no longer has a job as the Void Wispon can do it better. All of that is bad enough on its own, as once again, mechanics have been repeated in the same playstyle. But some of these Wispons have perks of their own. Stop on a dime, gain rings from enemies that are defeated, gain more points from grinding on rails. The avatar is getting closer to just being an omnipotent god. The avatar stages now become an absolute breeze to get through. I remember one stage that was full of quite challenging platform segments and a part where you're chased by a slowly approaching laser beam. But equip the Hover Wispon with extra perks that make you practically invincible, and you can complete this stage with 999 rings in less than 2 minutes. They made the Wispons too good. The avatar stages have barely any challenge to them now, and the only really interesting appeal are the settings and themes of the levels. If you want to make the avatar powerful, then you could do it by perhaps making the extra perks on the Wispons a little less impactful. Maybe you receive less rings for defeating enemies and reaching checkpoints. Maybe instead of stopping on a dime, slowing down your speed becomes quicker so that it can still punish those that are a little too slow with their reactions, but will still be useful. It would balance the game out more and could still offer some challenge to the avatar stages, but once again, missed opportunity. Other than gameplay styles, there are other minor general mistakes and changes in the core gameplay itself. For starters, Forces did something I don't think anyone was expecting. They removed the life system. For as long as I can remember, platformers have always given you 5 lives at the start of the game, and each failure of a part of a level puts you back to the last checkpoint with 1 less life in your pocket. Once you run out of lives, game over, and you have to start the stage from the beginning again. But Forces seems to be the exception to this golden rule. There are no lives, just infinite retries. On the first look, you probably think, oh wow, I can go on forever and never need to reload a stage again, this is great. But is such a spectacular sounding concept actually worthwhile in practice? The short answer is yes. The long answer is no. Let me elaborate. In the short term, having no life risk makes traversing a level a lot less stressful, especially if you're on a more challenging stage. There's no real punishment for dying in this game, apart from a worse rank at the end of a stage. But who cares about ranks? You can come back and do the level again if you really want to. We have all the time in the world here, and therein lies the problem in the long term. The fact that there are no risks in losing progress takes away from the weight and value of conserving your life. After all, what's the point of playing smart when you can try and try again by bouncing around like a kangaroo? It makes the game feel even easier than it already was, and that's in a game with very short stages, very powerful weapons, very simplistic bosses, and a very limited number of levels. Keeping the life system in would have done so much better for this game's longevity, as while some people don't like the system, it does still give the game a tiny extra bit of challenge and a way of making sure you learn from mistakes. I don't need Sega to hold my hand as I go through this game, I can stand on my own 2 feet. If I make a mistake in a level 1 too many times, I should not be given a never-ending retry supply. The looming thought of starting over again is what would normally compel people to focus and perform better. Hell, the life system was almost exclusively made for the platformer genre. This new system just makes the experience worse in the long run. Just offer us a bit more challenge. Oh wait, what's this? 114 of them? Now we're getting somewhere. Another new change made for Forces was the addition of challenges, all ranging in objectives to do. Complete a stage in X amount of time, get an S rank on stage Y, use a specific Wispon in an avatar stage. There's a lot to complete. That's great and all, but what do you get out of these challenges? Cosmetics to equip on your avatar. Okay, that seems reasonable enough. I won't lie, the challenge system is a decent alternative to what the challenge stages were in Generations. It's got similar challenges in all of them, but extra content is extra content at the end of the day. Yet, why am I still recovering from sore fingers? Because I had to be absolutely precise with my timing to finish a stage in under 120 seconds, of course. While a good majority of the challenges are stupidly easy that you would likely get on accident, a selective few are pretty infuriating to do. either because of the fact that the game's engine makes careful platforming a throbbing headache, or because the challenge itself requires a sheer mountainous amount of skill and timing to accomplish. I know I've bashed on about how bloody baby-proof this game is, but Jesus Christ man, a couple of these challenges took me a long time to complete. It's either one way or the other. This game never manages to reach the Goldilocks zone that is a fun yet decently challenging experience. So much for replay value. Oh wait, the challenges attempt to remedy that as well in the form of daily challenges. These are all really easy tasks you can complete that appear every day. Upon completing a task, you receive a score booster for 30 minutes. It starts off as a low multiplier but ends up doubling your score. That's neat and all and can help with attaining an S rank in stages, but is increased score the thing that's going to make people come back daily? Single player platformers have always had a bit of a problem with replay value. Once you've completed it, normally only two things could make a player return to the game again. If it had a rich, complex and interesting story, and if it had amazing gameplay, whether that be from setting or just brilliant smooth controls. Forces has neither of those things, so what's the next step? Introducing a feature that will become irrelevant once completing the game, of course. I get why Sega added this in. The game on its own was very short, didn't have great controls, wasn't very flashy or memorable in its story, it was bound to be forgotten. So how do we keep people playing? Add a mechanic that only really works for massively multiplayer games. The system is just really shallow because there is no economy, there's no skill you can get better at by doing these daily tasks, they're not designed for platformers in the first place. They're designed for Grand Theft Auto Online, Rainbow Six Siege, The Crew 2, games that focus heavily on the multiplayer aspect. But doesn't Forces have multiplayer too? Well, sort of. We got the ranking system for online play. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but modders thwart the rankings by completing stages in 0.01 seconds, making attempting to get world record stages impossible. And actually, why are modders doing this in Forces? Of all the titles, Forces? There's a final thing I'll touch upon with the gameplay, the visual issues. There are a few that do take you out of the moment, like how Sonic's back spikes clip through his head, how holding boost when freefalling causes his body to distort into an unnatural pose, how he has no idle animations, stuff like this. It's minor but really does add up to the disappointment with this title. So content and gameplay... Eesh. Final topic of conversation, the plot, its ludicrous nature and the issues that it presents to the whole Sonic canon. I've already described about the problems with the level theming, but I mean, at the end of the day, maybe they were just always there and Sega disclosed the fact that they were there. That's passable. What isn't passable though, is the reason why Classic Sonic is in the game in the first place. This is an anniversary game, yet they didn't give a proper explanation as to why he is even there at all. He appears for the first time in a cutscene while Tails is fixing Omega. Well, yeah, I forgot to say, this bastard is in the story for some godforsaken reason. Is he important? No, not at all. So yeah, fixing Omega, Chaos appears out of a very convenient manhole cover, then Classic Sonic just comes barreling through a portal, stomps on his head and he dies. But it's okay, we've still got another half of the cutscene to explain why he's here. So go on then Tails, enlighten us. How did he make his way back to this timeline?
Oh, you're that Sonic from another dimension, aren't you? Right, that makes sense, I think. Do you know how you got here? Maybe the power that Eggman is using is somehow affecting other dimensions.
The power of the Phantom Ruby, a thing that has been shown to only make fake copies of previous adversaries and illusions, apparently has the power to create portals to alternate dimensions. Right. First problem with this is the fact that this is never brought up, shown or even questioned again. If the Phantom Ruby has this power, then why don't other things make an appearance as well? Why isn't Classic Tails making a return too? Classic Sonic is the only one that has been affected by this crystal and its apparent power to make people from different dimensions appear. I get that you're forcing him into the game by any means necessary, but if that's the way you're going to do it, then stay consistent with it and put other things in as well for it to all add up. Speaking of which, he's described as being that one guy from another dimension. But wasn't he from the past? He's literally Sonic from 1991, yet Tails said and continues to say that this is somehow only affecting alternate dimensions. You could say that maybe the classic world is an alternate reality just 30 years behind the current one, but that doesn't add up either, because in Generations both versions of Tails come to the conclusion that they're travelling through time and space. And this is backed up by the main overarching theme of time throughout every inch of Generations as well. So which is it, Forces? You tell me. And that's another important detail, the main theme throughout a game's plot. I've already talked about the theme of war and forces and how it had such a tight grip on a whole range of aspects of the story and saturation and all that stuff. But I've reserved the secondary theme, that is perception, for now. Because you see, going through the plot of the game, we combat against illusions, we wield the power of undoing said illusions, we view all of the 7 locations as strategical areas now. It's definitely got the theme of perception at play here. And with that theme, you must follow the guidelines of it, unlike how the general aesthetic of the game didn't suit the serious war story Forces was trying to convey. And since perception is also a key ingredient in the Forces formula, all of the abnormal should be established as being under the influence of the Phantom Ruby. That way we have an easy to grasp understanding of its power and its effects on the world around us. But the implication that it can also create portals to other realities throws this theme out of proportion as well. Now both themes are inconsistent and this is where stuff gets messy. I'll try not to go off on a rant. Without the foundations of at least one consistent theme, the lore and general plot just begin to crumble. For example, the Phantom Ruby can only do stuff on command. It needs an input from someone to do something. It can't do an action on its own accord. Now when Classic Sonic appears, the Phantom Ruby is in enemy hands. The only way for this Sonic to make a logical appearance would be if Infinite actively made the portal appear willingly. But why would he do that? To give himself an extra challenge? Infinite is not a cocky antagonist. If anything, he goes straight to the point immediately, no questions asked. So Classic Sonic's arrival is not heroic or justified. He's brought in just for the sake of plot convenience, and that concludes the worst cutscene in the game. Now let's fast forward to the radio chatter that happens just before stage 15. Here Sonic states that the last time he ran into Shadow, he was working for Eggman. This is a load of bollocks, as the last time we saw him in the canonical games, ergo not in Boom, he was just being a self-centered dick trying to prove his might. Now I could be completely wrong on this statement, as I know there are comics that explain extra bits of lore here and there, and maybe something happened there, but I haven't read the comics yet. I'm going off of the canon presented in the games, and going off of this leads to the contradiction. All you needed to do was just find a copy of Generations and boom, there's the last time we heard from him. Another thing brought to you by good old Classic Sonic over here is the ending to the campaign. After you defeat Eggman in the final fight, we get a panning shot of all the illusions and things created by the Phantom Ruby evaporate into thin air. All the Zavix, Shadows, Metal Sonics, the whole shebang. So going by this logic, Classic should have evaporated with them, right? He is bound to the modern timeline because of that purple crystal, so he should follow the rules that have been shown to take effect, right? Of course not. He fades away slower than the production time of GTA 6 and is given a send-off by Tails. Once again, the rules of how the Phantom Ruby works are shown to us, then literal seconds later, they're broken again by this con artist. Either stick to the Matrix-like rules you've applied, or don't. There's no need for certain characters to be exempt for no apparent reason. Think that's it for the story? Oh, think again. A lot of characters are in this game for no reason at all. Remember Omega from earlier? Yeah, he makes this big bold entrance in the fight outside the Empire Fortress, and that's it. We don't hear from him again after that. Silver might as well just be called Dr. Exposition with the lines he's given. At every feasible opportunity he just unloads exposition into a conversation, which makes him feel so artificial. Vector. Wait, what was his purpose? Same goes for Amy, Charmy, Espio. They're so unimportant that it baffles me why they were even here in the first place. There's no intertwined massive story going on like there was in Sonic Adventure, it's just this. No context, no info, no interest. Back on Classic's case, modern Sonic is completely oblivious to the fact that he returned with zero explanation. He just makes a pun and goes back to talking business. Why is he not questioning his presence? Is time travel just another day in the office for him now? Speaking of modern, why didn't Sonic try and escape in the several months he's been in captivity? Knowing the character, he would not just wait around for months on end accepting defeat so easily. And why is he unaffected by the alleged torture he's received? Not even a slight change in his mentality? balls of steel, I gotta say. The episode Shadow DLC is so shallow in giving extra backstory that it makes the writing of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom look like Shakespeare by comparison. Sporting characters we've come to like over the years are given little to no screen time for the sake of showing a shallow antagonist arc which amounts to nothing more than gloating and too much pride. The game progresses at a constant rate and feels as if we are always winning what is supposed to be an arduous uphill battle. Throughout the campaign, Sonic's side takes so few hits that it makes this whole war scenario seem laughable. The only losses are conveyed through vague radio message that act more as exposition dumps than believable dialogue. We are actively told in a message from Amy that 80% of our forces have been wiped out and we've lost contact with the rest. But it's okay, we've got our one-man army over here still kicking ass while all this turmoil is supposedly going on. Contradictions up the arse and general mistakes in the storytelling soil this game's attempt at selling us a more mature story and keeping the lore intact. In the future, either keep it sane or keep it simple, because this certainly isn't either, and I don't mean that in a good way. So overall, why did I make this analysis? Well, I don't know, why do I do anything? Honestly though, I wanted to have a more serious look into why Forces failed the way it did and how Sega can avoid doing it again. Sonic the Hedgehog is without question my favourite platformer series, surpassing Mario, Crash Bandicoot, Banjo-Kazooie, Hand Time and even Spyro, and yet Sega keep on finding themselves in a rut with some of the entries to the series. I've seen it constantly go into this cycle of poor production time means the game will be rushed, the game gets released, there's backlash from fans and general critics alike, then eventually Sega will make a drop-dead amazing title, then games will slowly deteriorate back to rock bottom again. Strictly speaking, Forces is a playable game, but it falls flat in almost all aspects of its core, and what it all boils down to is really what happened behind the scenes. And I can sort of forgive Sega for what they do, apart from what they did to Big Red Button and Rise of Lyric. That was... The reason I say that is because Sega always seem to be experimenting and testing the waters to find every formula that works. They have found those sweet spots before, and they've found ones that don't really work either. I respect them for trying, but I guess that doesn't completely excuse this game's severe flaws. For a rushed title because of time constraints, Sega managed to only just make a playable game, but it just didn't live up to the hype or deliver anything memorable overall. So it goes downhill from here, yes? Well, not exactly. Sega have come out saying that they are taking more time to make the next proper game as good as it can be. As well as this, they have confirmed that there will be more 3D and 2D levels coming in the future. So, more games like Sonic Mania? Well, hell yes! And let's not forget about the fantastic movie that came out in February. That stands out as one of, if not the best video game film out there, and I still love it. And it's got a confirmed sequel coming out on April 8th, 2022, and you can bet your ass I'll be there on opening day. Sonic's IP is being experimented with again, but not through gameplay changes, multimedia representation. Films, music, comics, popularity is spiking and he is definitely in the spotlight once again. With all this attention coming in now from so many angles and Sega taking their time with their next project, maybe Forces can be used as a stepping stone to finally make the games more compelling by knowing what not to do. The future looks bright, and so long as Sega doesn't make yet another anniversary game that forces classic gameplay into it again, Sonic could do even better than ever before. Wait, hang on. Isn't he turning 30 next year? So there'll be... Oh, fuck!